The rain fell softly over the rolling fields of Wiltshire as Lydia Fairbairn's car made its slow way up the winding lane. The headlights caught the silver drizzle that clung to the hedgerows like threads of glass. She had not returned to this part of the countryside since she was a child. Yet now, Briarwood Cottage belonged to her. Her late aunt, Beatrice Whitlow, had been a recluse for as long as Lydia could remember. The villagers used to whisper about her, strange lights in the windows at night, voices heard through the open fields. Lydia never believed those stories, but now, as the cottage came into view through the mist, she felt something cold stir within her. Briarwood stood at the edge of a dense woodland, its stone walls darkened by age, its windows shuttered tight. The roof sagged slightly, heavy with moss. Still, there was a strange beauty to it, like a forgotten memory refusing to fade. When she unlocked the front door, the hinges groaned as if in protest. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lavender and dust. The furniture was covered in white sheets, and a single clock ticked faintly somewhere down the hall. She switched on a lamp, and the dim yellow glow revealed a portrait above the fireplace, a woman who looked almost exactly like her, though dressed in the fashion of a century ago. Lydia stared at the face in disbelief. The same dark hair, the same shape of eyes. For a moment, she felt as though the woman in the painting was watching her. As the night deepened, the rain turned to a steady storm. She found Beatrice's old bedroom and lit the oil lamp beside the bed. The wind howled outside, and the floorboards creaked in slow, uneven rhythm. Just as she was about to drift into uneasy sleep, she heard it, soft footsteps above her, moving across the attic floor. Her breath caught. The cottage had been locked for years. There should have been no one there. Gripping the lamp, she stepped into the hall. The air felt colder now, as though the storm had found its way inside. She looked up toward the attic door, and the footsteps stopped abruptly. Then, from somewhere behind her, came the faint sound of a clock chiming, though she could have sworn she had not seen one anywhere in the house. Lydia turned slowly, her heart pounding. The chime echoed once more, deeper this time, as if it came from within the walls themselves. And when she raised the lamp, its light fell upon the bookshelf at the end of the hall, where, for the briefest moment, she saw something impossible. A door handle. Half hidden beneath the shelves. The lamp flickered. The house seemed to exhale. And Lydia whispered into the stillness, her voice trembling. "What did you leave behind, Aunt Beatrice?" The only answer was the soft creak of the hidden door shifting slightly open on its own. The morning came grey and heavy with fog. Lydia awoke with the faintest memory of the door half open behind the bookshelf, unsure if it had truly happened or if it had been a dream stitched by the storm. The fire in the hearth had long gone out, leaving the cottage cold and silent. She descended the stairs, her slippers brushing over the worn oak floor. The smell of damp wood lingered. For a long moment, she stood in front of the bookshelf, the same one she had seen the night before. The spines of the old books were faded, their titles barely legible. When she reached out and ran her fingers along the shelf, one of the books gave a dull click. The entire panel shifted slightly forward. Her breath caught. She pulled, and the section of the wall swung open with a soft groan. A narrow doorway revealed itself. Beyond it, a spiral staircase descended into darkness. Lydia hesitated. The air that drifted from below was colder still, tinged with a scent she could not place, something like iron and earth. She lit the oil lamp once again, its glow trembling against the damp stone walls, and began to step down. The stairs were carved directly into the rock, uneven and narrow. As she descended, she saw the remains of cobwebs, small fragments of parchment scattered on the steps, and what looked like the edge of an old map burned at one corner. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a small underground chamber. It was circular, lined with shelves and boxes covered in dust. In the center stood a table, and upon it, a single envelope with her name written in faded ink. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was her aunt's. My dearest Lydia, it began, if you are reading this, then the house has chosen you. There are truths buried beneath Briarwood that must never see the light. I beg you, leave before you find what I could not forget. The words bled into one another, smudged by time and moisture. At the bottom of the letter, something else had been written hastily. A name. Eliza Fairborn. Lydia frowned. Fairborn, her own surname. But she had never heard of any Eliza in her family. A faint sound interrupted her thoughts. From somewhere in the darkness of the room came the scraping of wood against stone, slow and deliberate. She turned sharply, holding up the lamp. One of the old boxes on the shelf had shifted on its own. She stepped closer, the air tightening in her chest. When she reached for the box, she noticed a faint trail of soot along the floor leading behind the shelves. And there, carved into the wall, she found something far more disturbing, a name etched deep into the stone. Eliza Fairborn. The same name. Twice. Before she could think, a breath of cold air swept past her, snuffing out the lamp's flame. The darkness came alive. Somewhere behind her, a woman's whisper echoed softly through the chamber. You've come back at last. Lydia froze. The whisper lingered in the air, like breath on the back of her neck. She turned swiftly, but the room was now shrouded in thick, impenetrable darkness. Her fingers fumbled for the matches in her pocket, striking one with trembling hands. The small flame flickered to life, revealing the edges of the shelves once more. There was no one there. Only dust and shadow. Still, she could not shake the sensation that someone, or something, was standing just beyond the circle of light. The air had grown colder, heavy with the scent of burning wood. Then she noticed it, a faint line of soot trailing up one wall, disappearing behind a wooden panel near the floor. She knelt and pressed against the panel. It creaked open to reveal a small cavity filled with ash and fragments of charred paper. Among them, a half-burned photograph. Lydia brushed away the soot, and her heart skipped. The photograph showed two women standing in front of Briarwood Cottage. One was unmistakably her Aunt Beatrice, much younger, smiling faintly. The other woman looked identical to Lydia. Scrawled in ink on the back were 3 words, before the fire. Lydia stared at it, her breath trembling. The fire. The one that had taken her parents when she was a child. The one she'd been told was an accident. But Beatrice had been there. And who was the woman who looked exactly like her? She tucked the photo into her coat pocket and climbed back up the spiral stairs, each step echoing against the stone. The cottage was utterly silent now, save for the ticking of the unseen clock. Back in the living room, the morning light was fading fast behind thick clouds. She lit the fireplace, desperate for warmth, and unfolded her notebook to jot down what she had found. Yet as she wrote, she realized her handwriting seemed different. The loops were wider, the ink strokes unfamiliar. When she looked closer, her stomach turned. The words on the page were not her own. They read, "The walls remember what the living forget." A shiver ran through her. She dropped the pen and stood, heart pounding. From somewhere upstairs came the faint sound of a door opening. She climbed the staircase slowly, the boards creaking beneath her feet. The corridor was dim, the lamps still unlit. The door to Beatrice's old study stood ajar, though she was certain it had been closed. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of wax and ink. Papers were scattered across the desk, along with an unfinished letter. Lydia leaned closer, reading the first line. "My beloved Eliza, I fear I have gone too far. The experiment must end before the house takes her too." A sudden gust blew through the window, scattering the pages across the room. The flame of the fireplace flickered out. In that moment of near darkness, Lydia saw a shadow move along the far wall, tall, slender, unmistakably human. When she turned, the study was empty. Only the sound of quiet breathing lingered behind her. And then, faintly, from the corner of the room came a woman's voice, low and sorrowful. She should never have come back. That night, the storm returned. Rain lashed against the windows of Briarwood Cottage, and the trees outside bent low under the wind. Lydia sat by the fire, unable to focus on anything but the letter she had found in Beatrice's study. The words echoed endlessly in her mind. The experiment must end before the house takes her too. What experiment? And who was Eliza Fairbairn? She turned the pages of Beatrice's scattered notes. They were filled with sketches, of faces, of circles marked with symbols, and drawings of the cottage itself. In one margin, Beatrice had written a single phrase again and again. The reflection is not always yours. A chill crept over Lydia. She rose and crossed the room to the tall mirror above the mantel. The glass was fogged from the fire's warmth, her reflection soft and ghost-like. She wiped it with her sleeve, and froze. For a fleeting second, the woman in the mirror smiled back before she did. Lydia stumbled backward, heart hammering. The mirror was still. Her own face stared back, pale and frightened. Yet as she watched, faint words began to appear across the glass, as though drawn by invisible fingers. You know my name. Lydia shook her head, whispering, No, I don't. The letters smudged, rearranged, and formed again. Eliza. She stared, unable to move. The name pulsed faintly before fading away, leaving the glass empty once more. She grabbed her coat and rushed outside into the storm, desperate to breathe, desperate to escape the suffocating stillness of the house. The wind tore at her hair, the rain striking her face like ice. Across the muddy lane, the faint light of a cottage window flickered, a neighbor, perhaps. She ran towards it, splashing through puddles. When she reached the small gate, she saw an elderly man peering out through the curtains. He opened the door cautiously, holding a lantern. Miss Fairbairn, he said, blinking against the rain. I didn't think I'd ever see one of your kind back there again. Lydia frowned. One of my kind. He nodded, his face pale in the lamplight. The Fairbairn women. Every one of them bound to that house. First Eliza, then Beatrice, and now you. It never lets them go. Her mouth went dry. You knew my aunt. Knew her. I saw her the night she died. His voice trembled. The house was alight, burning from the inside out, yet she was at the window, smiling. As though she'd found what she was looking for. The rain intensified, hammering the roof. Lydia's pulse raced. What was she looking for? The man looked at her, eyes wide with fear. Herself, miss. Or something wearing her face. A clap of thunder shook the ground. The lantern flickered, nearly dying out. When Lydia turned back towards Briarwood Cottage, she could see a faint glow at one of the upper windows, pale, shifting light like someone walking with a lamp. But she had left every lamp inside unlit. The storm outside had reached its peak. The wind clawed at the shutters, and rain lashed against the glass like 1,000 tiny fists. Lydia sat by the fireplace, her eyes fixed on the portrait she had found behind the false wall earlier that evening. The painting was of a young woman in a pale blue gown, her hair tied in the same way Lydia wore hers. Her expression was hauntingly familiar, half serene, half sorrowful. Lydia could not shake the feeling that she had seen that face before, not just in dreams, but somewhere deep in her memory. She leaned closer, her breath fogging the frame. Beneath the layers of cracked varnish, a faint inscription appeared near the bottom. It read, "To Lydia, with love. Until we meet again." Her heart stopped. The date beside it was 1924. How could that be? She whispered. The letters on the inscription shimmered faintly in the firelight, as if written not with paint, but with something alive. Then, from behind her, came a soft sound, a whisper, low and trembling. Do you remember me, Lydia? She froze. The voice was unmistakably her own. She turned towards the mirror hanging above the mantelpiece. Her reflection stood perfectly still, but her lips were moving. The reflection smiled faintly, tilting its head in a way Lydia never did. "You've come back," the reflection said softly. "At last." Lydia stumbled backwards, her breath shallow. "Who are you?" "You know who I am," the reflection replied. "You wrote the letters. You made the promise. You were her, once." The fire crackled, flaring higher as the air in the room thickened. Lydia's reflection began to shift, the eyes darkening, the smile fading into something sorrowful. "Briarwood remembers," it said. "And it's time you did too." Lydia reached for the portrait again, desperate for some clue, but her fingers brushed the surface of the mirror instead. It rippled like water, pulling her forward with invisible force. She tried to scream, but her voice was swallowed by the echo of her own reflection. The storm outside suddenly died, leaving only silence, and the faint scent of lavender drifting through the air. Inside the mirror, Lydia's reflection smiled once more, as though she had finally found her place. Morning came grey and silent. The air was heavy with mist, and Briarwood Cottage seemed to float within it like an island of secrets. Lydia awoke on the floor of the parlour, her head pounding, her skin cold with dew. The fire had gone out, yet the mirror still shimmered faintly, as if holding on to the last trace of moonlight. She rose shakily and stared into it. Only her reflection looked back, pale, wide-eyed, and afraid. But on the table beside her lay something that hadn't been there before, an old sepia photograph. It showed the same woman from the portrait, standing before Briarwood Cottage nearly a century ago. Beside her stood a man in a dark suit, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. The back of the photograph bore a short note written in elegant handwriting, "Eleanor Fairbairn and Dr. Thomas Hale, 1924. "Eleanor," Lydia murmured. "So that's your name." As she spoke it aloud, the floorboards creaked behind her. She turned sharply, but saw nothing. Only the soft movement of the curtains, stirred by a wind that wasn't there. Lydia clutched the photograph, her heart racing. Something compelled her to look again at the man in the picture. His eyes, sharp, intense, and strangely familiar, seemed to follow her. Then she noticed something chilling. The shadow cast by the man's figure didn't fall where it should have. Instead, it pointed towards the back of the room, directly at the mirror. Drawn by an unseen force, Lydia lifted the photograph closer to the glass. The reflection in the mirror changed. Instead of her own image, the room behind her appeared as it must have looked a century earlier, fresh wallpaper, oil lamps glowing, and a young woman, Eleanor, sitting at the desk, writing with a trembling hand. Lydia's breath caught. She could see every movement, every flick of Eleanor's pen. The woman looked up suddenly, her eyes locking with Lydia's through the mirror. "You shouldn't have come back," Eleanor whispered. Lydia staggered backwards, dropping the photograph. "What do you mean?" Eleanor's voice was almost mournful. "He never left. He's still here. And now, so are you." Before Lydia could respond, the reflection dissolved into darkness. A low thud echoed from somewhere beneath the floorboards, followed by a faint scraping sound, as though something, or someone, was stirring below the house. The mist outside thickened, pressing against the windows like a living thing. And from beneath the floor came a voice, a man's voice, soft, calm, and far too close. "Lydia, you found me at last." The voice lingered in the still air, echoing through the silence of Briarwood Cottage. Lydia's pulse pounded in her ears as she stepped back, her eyes darting toward the old rug that covered the center of the parlor floor. The sound came again, a slow, dragging movement, as if someone were crawling just beneath her feet. Summoning her courage, she pulled the rug aside. Beneath it lay a square outline of wooden planks, barely visible under the dust. A trapdoor. The brass handle was cold to the touch, and as she lifted it, a waft of air drifted up, stale, damp, and faintly metallic. "Lydia," the voice whispered again, softer now, almost tender. "Don't be afraid." She hesitated only for a moment before fetching a candle and striking a match. The flame flickered weakly, throwing shadows that danced across the walls as she descended the narrow staircase. Each step groaned under her weight, the air growing colder with every breath. At the bottom was a small cellar lined with stone, the walls streaked with years of moisture. Old tools hung rusted on nails, and a single table stood at the center, covered in yellowed papers. But it was the object lying beside the table that froze her in place, a dark wooden coffin, half open. Her candle trembled in her hand. "No," she whispered. Inside lay a body, or what was left of one. A man's frame, dressed in black, a silver ring glinting faintly on his bony finger. The name engraved on the ring was T. Hale. Yet the face, though pale and still, was not unfamiliar. It was eerily similar to Julian Ward, the architect who had visited her months before and mysteriously vanished after his last trip to Briarwood. "Impossible," Lydia breathed. Then, from behind her, came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, descending the stairs. She turned sharply, holding up her candle. Julian stood there. Alive. Or something that looked like him. His expression was calm, almost sorrowful. "I told you you'd find me," he said. "You had to. It was always you." Her candle flickered violently, the light shrinking into trembling orange. "Julian, what have you done?" He stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the floor like ink. "You don't understand, Lydia. This house binds us. It remembers. I tried to leave it, tried to burn it down, but it brought me back." His voice cracked, the human warmth fading into something hollow. "And now it wants you too." Lydia stumbled backward as the candle guttered out, plunging the cellar into darkness. The last thing she saw was Julian's eyes, no longer his, but something ancient and knowing, before the trapdoor above slammed shut, sealing her inside. Above her, the storm began again, and Briarwood Cottage groaned like a living thing reclaiming its own. Darkness pressed in from all sides. Lydia's eyes strained in the black cellar, her breaths coming in shallow, panicked gasps. The faint echo of the storm above merged with a low humming that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. She hugged herself, trying to gather courage. Then a faint glow appeared, emanating from a crack in the stone floor near the coffin. Lydia moved closer, heart pounding. Through the small fissure, she saw a swirling light, amber and green, shifting like liquid fire. She reached down hesitantly, and the moment her fingers touched it, a wave of memories and voices flooded her mind. Eleanor. Beatrice. Julian. Thomas Hale. And herself, in another time, writing letters, hiding truths, making promises she had long forgotten. Briarwood Cottage had preserved the lives of every fair-born woman, every soul bound by the house's legacy. And Thomas Hale, Julian, was the keeper, trapped between life and death, forced to maintain the cycle. The light pulsed again, stronger. Lydia understood now. The house demanded a witness, someone who could remember and tell its story. Someone who could break the cycle. And it had chosen her. Lydia, Julian's voice, or the voice that had been Hale's, whispered softly. Do it. Accept it. Remember everything. She drew a deep breath and closed her eyes. Slowly, she let herself sink into the memories, the whispers, the laughter and terror of generations trapped within the walls. Names, faces, promises, betrayals, they all streamed through her mind, crystal clear. She saw the truth behind every fire, every disappearance, every letter. She saw the love, the fear, and the secrets that had shaped Briarwood Cottage. And then, a warmth unlike any she had felt reached her heart. It was understanding, acceptance, release. The storm above softened. The candlelight returned, faintly, revealing Julian, finally himself again, calm, human, relieved. "Thank you," he said. His eyes, once hollow, now shone with life. "You freed us all." The cellar no longer felt oppressive. The coffin was empty, the papers scattered but intact, and the whispering walls were silent. Briarwood Cottage breathed, as though it could rest at last. Lydia climbed the stairs slowly, emerging into the soft light of dawn. Outside, the mist had lifted. The house stood quiet, timeless, and safe, yet she knew the stories it held, the secrets she now carried. As she stepped into the morning, the weight of centuries pressed lightly upon her, not as a burden, but as a legacy she would remember, and perhaps, one day, tell. Briarwood Cottage had claimed its witness, and in doing so, it had finally found peace.